Have you ever wondered what needs to be done to send a whole country to ruins? The story of Venezuela will not tell you but show you. Stay tuned to uncover the journey that transformed a nation into economic despair and chaos. Welcome to our two-part series, Once Upon a Time in Venezuela. In part 1, we delve into the era of Hugo Chávez, the charismatic yet controversial leader who reshaped Venezuela's identity and economy. From his rise to power in the early 2000s to his sweeping reforms and the eventual economic decline, this episode unpacks everything he did wrong in his quest to stay in power. We have added a bonus chapter at the end named Chávez's Most Scandalous International Moments. We hope you like it, and make sure to follow part 2, where we uncover Maduro's regime. Join us as we explore the decisions and events that set the stage for Venezuela's ongoing crisis. A bit of history. Once upon a time in Venezuela, the early 2000s marked the rise of Hugo Chávez, a charismatic yet manipulative leader who sought to consolidate power and reshape the nation to fit his vision. Chavez didn't just aim to help the poor. He wanted complete control. He changed the country's flag, altered the national shield, and even renamed the country to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to reflect his personal ideology. With the nation rich in oil, Chavez exploited this wealth to fund extensive social programs, which he used to garner support and reinforce his rule. In the mid-2000s, Chávez's thirst for control led him to make several economic decisions that would later prove disastrous. He began imposing strict controls on the prices of essential goods like food and medicine, and nationalized numerous private businesses, bringing them under government control. Initially, these measures appeared successful as poverty rates dropped and social services improved. However, government management was inefficient, and corruption spread like wildfire. To sustain the growing expenditures, the government started printing more money, resulting in rising inflation. As the late 2000s approached, trouble loomed on the horizon. The global financial crisis hit, causing a significant drop in oil prices. Venezuela, heavily reliant on oil revenues, started to feel the strain. With less money coming in but continued high spending, the economy began to falter. Inflation worsened, and the country started experiencing shortages of basic goods. The financial mismanagement and over-reliance on oil revenues were starting to show their adverse effects. By the early 2010s, Venezuela's economic situation had deteriorated severely. Chávez's health declined, and knowing his time was limited, he handpicked Nicolás Maduro as his successor to ensure his legacy and maintain control. Chavez left office, and Maduro took over the reins of a country already in crisis. Everything Chavez did wrong and how he ruined a rich country. Nationalization of industries. Chávez's government took control of various key industries, including oil, electricity, telecommunications, and food production. Nationalization often led to decreased efficiency, as the government-run entities lacked the expertise and incentives that private companies had. This shift resulted in reduced productivity, lower quality of services, and decreased investment from the private sector due to fear of expropriation. Excessive spending on social programs. The government funded numerous social programs aimed at reducing poverty and improving healthcare and education. While these programs initially benefited the population, they were not financially sustainable. The excessive spending without adequate savings or investments for the future drained the country's resources and contributed to growing budget deficits. Price controls. To make basic goods more affordable, the government imposed strict price controls on items like food and medicine. However, these controls often led to producers being unable to cover their costs, resulting in reduced production. Consequently, this led to widespread shortages, forcing people to turn to black markets where prices were significantly higher. Currency controls. Chavez implemented a fixed exchange rate and strict controls on the exchange of foreign currency. This created a black market for foreign exchange where the bolivar, Venezuela's currency, was traded at rates far worse than the official rate. Businesses and individuals struggled to obtain foreign currency, hindering imports and creating economic distortions. To finance government spending and social programs, the Central Bank of Venezuela printed large amounts of money. This excessive money supply led to hyperinflation, eroding the value of the bolivar and dramatically increasing the cost of living. Savings were wiped out and purchasing power diminished. Venezuela's economy relied heavily on oil exports, neglecting other sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. When oil prices fell, the lack of diversification left the economy vulnerable, as there were no alternative sources of revenue to cushion the impact of declining oil income. During the oil boom, instead of saving or investing the windfall, the government spent it on populist projects. This lack of foresight meant that when oil prices dropped, there were no reserves to fall back on, exacerbating the economic crisis. Corruption and inefficiency. Nationalized industries and government projects were plagued by corruption and mismanagement. Funds were often siphoned off by corrupt officials, and inefficiency became rampant. This resulted in poor service delivery and wasted resources, further weakening the economy. Inadequate maintenance of infrastructure. The government neglected the maintenance and upgrading of critical infrastructure. This led to frequent power outages, water shortages, and transportation issues. The deteriorating infrastructure contributed to the declining quality of life and hindered economic activity. Populist policies. Chavez implemented many short-term measures designed to win popular support, such as handing out subsidies and increasing public sector employment. These policies were not economically sustainable and led to increased government spending without corresponding revenue growth, worsening the fiscal deficit. Undermining private sector. The government's policies discouraged private investment and entrepreneurship. Frequent nationalizations and regulatory uncertainties created a hostile business environment, leading to capital flight and a decline in private sector activity. Restrictive business environment, excessive regulations, bureaucratic red tape, and the threat of expropriation created a restrictive environment for businesses. This stifled economic growth, reduced innovation, and limited the country's ability to attract foreign investment. Neglect of agricultural sector. Focused on oil revenues, the government neglected agriculture, leading to a decline in domestic food production. This increased dependency on food imports, which became problematic when foreign currency reserves dwindled, leading to food shortages. Political patronage and clientelism. Resources and government positions were often allocated based on loyalty to Chavez rather than competence. This practice resulted in inefficient management and misallocation of resources, as key positions were filled by individuals more focused on maintaining their political standing than on effective governance. International isolation. Chavez's confrontational foreign policy and alignment with controversial regimes led to strained relationships with many countries. This reduced foreign investment and international support, further isolating Venezuela economically and diplomatically. Sanctions imposed by the United States and other countries in response to Chavez's policies and human rights abuses exacerbated the economic difficulties. And there you have it. Chavez made sure to have the most control possible of every organism and then neglected their development, leading to the crisis the country lives in today. Bonus. Chavez's most scandalous international moments. United Nations speech, 2006. During a speech at the United Nations General Assembly, Chavez referred to U.S. President George W. Bush as the devil and suggested that the podium still smelled of sulfur from Bush's previous speech. This inflammatory remark garnered global attention and controversy, showcasing Chavez's confrontational style on the international stage. Support for controversial leaders. Chavez formed strong alliances with controversial leaders such as Fidel Castro of Cuba, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad of Iran, and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. These relationships isolated Venezuela from many Western countries and aligned it with regimes that were often at odds with international norms and human rights standards. Withdrawal from the Andean community. In 2006, Chavez announced Venezuela's withdrawal from the Andean community, a regional trade bloc, criticizing its trade policies in alignment with U.S. interests. This move further isolated Venezuela economically and politically from its regional neighbors. Conflict with Colombia. Relations between Venezuela and Colombia deteriorated under Chavez, particularly due to accusations that Chavez was supporting FARC rebels in Colombia. Tensions peaked with the temporary severing of diplomatic ties and military posturing along the border. Nationalization of foreign companies. Chavez's aggressive nationalization of foreign-owned companies, including major oil firms, led to numerous international disputes and lawsuits. These actions damaged Venezuela's reputation as a reliable destination for foreign investment and led to significant financial settlements against the country. Petro-Caribe Initiative. Chavez launched the Petro-Caribe Initiative, providing oil to Caribbean and Central American countries at preferential rates. While this garnered political support from beneficiary countries, it strained Venezuela's finances and was seen by critics as an attempt to buy influence and loyalty. King of Spain Incident, 2007. During the Ibero-American Summit in 2007, Chavez repeatedly interrupted the Spanish Prime Minister, prompting King Juan Carlos I of Spain to famously tell him, "¿Por qué no te callas? Why don't you shut up?" This public rebuke highlighted Chavez's contentious diplomatic style and received widespread international media coverage. It is fair to say Chavez let the power get to his head. He felt invincible, and that no one was as important as him. Later, when he got sick and wasn't sure if he'd make it, he handpicked Maduro just simply because he wasn't a threat. Nicolás was completely under his control, and Chavez knew he wouldn't be betrayed by him. Of course, Hugo Chávez didn't really expect to pass away, and after that the legacy was inherited by Maduro. To continue, please check the next video, Once Upon a Time in Venezuela Part 2 Maduro, and find out why Venezuela is trending news in 2024.